Right now, there are 2 cases consolidating Chinese attention, 3 Armory collections desperately waiting for a deadline, a buying pattern that keeps confirming to be correct, and stickers are starting to move for the first time in months. If you are in the market and you are not paying attention to China, you are behind.
And now for our Counter-Strike report. New York's very own Mike Water.
Welcome back to DE News China. I'm your host, Mike Water 9. Let's break all of this down. As for the indexes, the most notable one is the Armory Phase 2 or Arsenal Phase 2 as the Chinese call it. The index as a whole is up 3%, which is pretty big considering it includes every single wear of every single gun within the Armory. And the Armory movement is not random. In fact, it's twofold. One, of course, because we're expecting news about which ones will be discontinued and which ones will stay, leading to anticipatory purchasing. And for those of you tuning in for the first time, Windking, a prominent Chinese market figure, put out a call to action on specific Armory skins if and when they do get removed. From Train 2025, the Long Dog, Hellish, and Latte Rush. From Overpass 2024, the Be the Monster and the Crakow. And from Sport and Field, the Glock Axia. Now, if you watched my video regarding Train 2025 and why I believe it to be one of the best investments in the Armory, not only right now, but in the foreseeable future, then you'll know why Windking is targeting the most volume of skins within this collection. Windking typically tends to lean towards more fundamental-based plays and leverages that with his high capital to create massive market manipulation. But if you're not familiar, let me briefly walk you through it again and show you why it is stronger compared to the other 2 collections. Now, Train 2025 is the most compelling play in the Armory right now for a whole multitude of reasons. First off, of course, you have the Tech 9 Whiteout pipeline. The Whiteout, despite it being a purple, commands tons of demand in terms of blues and trade-ups. The Whiteout, though it's a purple, commands a ton of demand, not only as a play skin, but downstream affects mil-spec prices because it is such a hard road to get to. A draining mil-spec supply with the end goal of getting the Tech 9 Whiteout ends that trade-up chain right there, which leads to less purples, less pinks, and less reds in the future. This is not even taking into account the fact that Train 2025 has less redemptions than graphic design as of right now. 2, which is the main part we spoke about in last video, is the float caps. The Hellish, Latte, and Long Dog are all 0 to 1. This not only makes it harder to unbox in the Armory, but it also makes it structurally harder to trade up to with fillers. And it is compounded because both the pinks and the reds all share this 0 to 1 float cap. So even with it being active in the Armory, it makes it much easier to control prices because the supply of these incoming is so non-frequent and easy to manipulate. And combining the first 2 points, it's going to be harder to get pinks, not only because of the float cap, but because one of the fillers is unusable, the Tech 9. You could use the Mac 10 under 0.049 float, or the Zeus in factory new. The Tech 9 in minimal wear, it's a little bit more expensive, so you're better off using the other 2 fillers, which will drain supply quicker and thus cause a relative shortage in the supply of purples. Hard not to mention that the trade-up fillers in this collection, the M4 Hellish is a decently well-liked play skin, as well as the MP9. The Zeus and Tech 9 also look very good, but they're not super, commonly used guns, so I can't really give that towards any conviction, but this is all happening independent of China. If China puts any amount of effort into pumping this collection, it will rise the fastest, and it will rise the most in terms of magnitude. So China pumping this collection is not the thesis, it is simply the accelerant on a fire that is already burning. The next collection is the Overpass 2024 collection. Now Overpass is second, staunchly second. The Be the Monster, while not 0 to 1 like the Long Dog, is 0 to 8. So unboxing it in factory new is still going to be relatively hard. It's still restricted, but there is much more breathing room than the Long Dog. And of course, trade-ups are more forgiving because of the float cap. And that's because a minimal wear, Crakow, even though it is 0 to 1, can get you a factory new Be the Monster under 0.09, I believe. And the Zeus, despite it not being 0 to 1, can also be used factory new to trade up to the Be the Monster as well. So if the factory new Crakow is out of your budget range, you could consider going for a minimal wear one, just making sure that your float value is in the range to trade up to a factory new Be the Monster, and you might be able to leverage that in the future, especially if it's discontinued. Same thing goes for the Zeus, just make sure you know that cutoff for the Zeus before you purchase. Luckily, you could plug this straight into the reverse trade-up calculator on cs2liquid.com and figure it out for yourself. Now, the Sport and Field benefits the least in terms of fundamentals and in terms of Chinese attention. And it's because of its fundamentals is why it's not getting any of the attention that Train and Overpass would. The M4 Fade, as we know, only comes in factory new and minimal wear, factory new being dropped 97% of the time. So while there are an equal amount of Be the Monsters and fades, there's many more factory new fades, which concentrates the supply, making it very hard to control price movement. It'll simply take too much money to coordinate a push, and it won't be worth it when other cases and collections exist that require much less capital to move in a meaningful, significant way. They are, however, focusing on one skin within the collection, that is the Glock 18 Axia. I imagine they are doing this because it trades up to the M4 fade, which, regardless of its supply, will still be desirable. In fact, I actually like the Glock Axia in field tested, independent of China, because right now it currently sits at $45-ish, which is like almost exactly 1/10 of the price of an M4 fade. So if you get lucky and get a good fade percentage, then you're sitting pretty. I also don't mind the Galil in this collection either. The Chinese have been pumping Galils and FAMASs for some reason, and I don't see why they wouldn't stay away from the Rainbow Spoon if the collection does get discontinued. So just maybe having one of those as well, as opposed to just purchasing a bunch of Axias, might be a better play there. On top of this, the 5.7 Heat Treated, which is a purple within the collection, the only one of which having a 0-1 float cap, is extremely expensive in factory new right now and has seen massive gains over the last 2 to 3 weeks. Combine this with the fact that you could get blue gems for this one, it makes for a really interesting opportunity here. I've been pretty staunch on the 5.7 Heat Treated. I've been buying them since around December at around $15 to $20 each, and they're up 3x already, and we've received zero news regarding them. Now, outside of the Armory, 2 cases are pulling ahead of the pack. After last week, where attention was scattered amongst a whole bunch of cases, it's consolidated down to 2 main players: Shattered Web and Winter Offensive. Of course, there are other skins within other collections that have seen movement, but these are the 2 cases that have housed the most top movers over the last 7 days. Shattered Web first. I called the Rat Rod around 2 weeks ago when it was at $12. It went to $26 and has since dipped over the last 7 days, going back down to around $13, $14. Right, we saw that pump start to happen. It looked very strong, but I don't think they had as big of a grip on the supply as they thought they did, and thus had to let go a little bit early. I'm still not worried though. I think they will return to this gun because they are pivoting within the case and not pivoting outside of the case as a broad index. The other purples it shares the rarity with, the AUG Arctic Wolf, the P2000 Obsidian, and the MP7 Neon Ply, were all top movers this week. The MP7 Neon Ply being the top mover in the last 24 hours, nearly doubling in price, up to $70 at the moment. Unrelated, but also other MP7s caught a massive wave too, the Asterion and the Empire. Now, the knives in this case are fairly lackluster, but the AWP and Mac 10, which are the coverts, are 0-1. And that should remind you of something. Same thesis. When the coverts are structurally hard to trade up to, you remove an entire supply path towards receiving one. The only way to get one is through an unboxing, and as the case price rises to match the EV on the case, well then less people open them. That's just simply how it works. The Winter Offensive case, on the other hand, despite not having 0-1 float cap guns, does have a much better selection in terms of knives. The case itself is more attractive to accumulation because the case price is higher, which makes unboxings less frequent and thus less incoming supply in general. Last week I called the M249 Magma and the Galil Sandstorm from the collections based on the float ranges, the M249 being the largest float range, the Galil having a very weird cutoff in minimal wear, making it very easy to purchase true factory news. And we saw the pattern start to happen with the Galil Sandstorm, which only further confirmed our convictions. Sandstorms are the top mover over the last 7 days, up 80% in the last week. But if you do hold one in minimal wear and it is under 0.135 float, well, you could probably get overpaid for that because that is a true factory new skin. And while you don't need that to get a true factory new purple, you are going to need those low float purples for pinks. The FAMAS Pulse, which was the signal from last week for the Winter Offensive case, is still holding very steady. They have a very firm grip on that supply. And now since we have the Rat Rod and Shattered Web as precedent, we could expect the FAMAS to dip slightly in the short term in favor. Hollow from Shanghai 2024 has maintained its price, staying at around $80 to $100 over the last few months. We've seen tons of these in Chinese inventories, so we know it's them, but they've been holding the line very well. They've been holding it for basically an eternity in Counter-Strike time. But now other Shanghais like Cloud9 and G2 are starting to get some love as well. This will be getting its own segment on Sunday's DE News. I just don't have enough time to dive deep on the stickers as a whole. And if it continues to move from now until Sunday, we will do a sticker report next week dedicated to all of the majors and all of the top movers within that sector alone. So stay tuned for that. Now Chinese accumulation patterns that we've spotted and started to use as a gauge as to which is going to be pumped next. Well, it's only confirming to be a super efficient and super high percentage way of spotting the next pump before it happens, or timing your purchases such that when they do spike again, you can get out for the maximum percentage gain possible. If you're unfamiliar, every single pump play leads with the same signature. The timeline tends to take a few weeks because when you buy a skin, you have to hold it for 7 days. Thus, there is a pretty big liquidity gap between this market and something else like a stock market where these types of pumps can happen in hours. Now, while it does take a long time, it makes your exit window very, very broad and very, very easy for you to get out. Usually see 2 to 3 price spikes with subsequent supply drops, and one final push in which price exceeds listings, and a subsequent listing phase in which all listings go up as well as price, meaning that they are taking their inventory, their supply, listing them for artificially high prices, and buying up the remaining low-priced ones, thus setting the price and becoming market makers in that skin specifically. And now we move over to last week's watch lists. Today's video has been sponsored by the lovely ladies and gentlemen over at skinsmonkey.com. Skinsmonkey is the industry standard trading forum and marketplace for anything and all things Counter-Strike. 24/7 support and an instant trading system so fast, those Bulgarian overpay goblins are sure to go out of business. Now, if that's not enough incentive, throw my code Mike in on the website for $5 off on your first trade. But if you trade up to $100 on the website, they'll double your bonus from 5 to 10. Now, if you don't have any skins and I just gave you some free game on investment advice, you could deposit money and use the website as a marketplace as well. In that case, my code Mike will net you a 5% deposit bonus, bringing it from 30 to 35%. So go get swagged out, courtesy of skinsmonkey.com. The alt fever dream continued to climb very slowly but surely, and one day it did see a tiny little spike, which we can assume is a test on the supply listings throughout the market. It is a relatively old skin at this point from the Spectrum 1 collection, and considering its current price and the prices of which AWPs have gone to, such as the AWP Elite build, which is also a pink, well, I don't think it's a bad thing holding a few of these as well. And of course the M249 Magma and Galil Sandstorm, which we've already covered, so let's move into this week's watch list. First and foremost, the Armory stays on the watch list until the first week of March, because you have very little time left to act. You should not be buying anything from the Armory after March 2nd, right? We can realistically expect an update on the Armory and the collections within it on March 9th or March 10th, which is precisely 3 weeks before March 31st, last year's update. If you are missing a position, you have days, not weeks to act. I do also believe that day, March 9th or March 10th, will be when the Budapest capsules get removed. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the day in which they announced the Armory discontinuations, the Austin capsules were removed as well, right, for a short-term little flip. And if you haven't opened any, the Budapest contenders still have a very, very high ROI compared to the other ones, and they're 25 cents a piece. If you get one Paravision Holo, you pay for 60 at a time. Genuinely, like, a pretty decent play. Very similar to the Austin situation we saw a few months ago. And lastly, I think as Chinese attention goes towards the Armory in the short term, the Anubis collection has dropped, but none of the underlying reasons have changed, right? We could still realistically expect this Arabesque collection to be Anubis 2026, right? Of course, it could be something else. Anubis and Arabesque don't necessarily go together perfectly, but it is our best guess considering what we've seen over the past few months, and the skins within it look pretty good. On top of this, all of the purples carry 0 to 1 float caps, making it very hard to trade up to, as we've spoken about with the AWP Long Dog and AWP Containment Breach in Shattered Web. This puts a specific pressure on the light blues, blues, and grays within the Anubis collection. So some ones that I purchased include the Mag 7 copper coated in factory new, which is a 0 to 1 Mag 7, as well as the SSG08 Azure Glyph, which has a odd float cap of 0.01 to 0.99, but it does help you out a little bit actually, because you can actually purchase minimal wear ones of these. I believe it has to be under 0.077 or something like that, so it's a very narrow gap, but if you could purchase some minimal wears within that one, you can trade up to factory news with them. And that is all for this week. If you are new, subscribe. I do this shit on Fridays and Sundays. Fridays for China, Sundays in general, about the broad state of the market. But for now, peace.